Many Strokes fans have noticed that At the Door on the New Abnormal feels like a spiritual successor to Call Me Back on Angles. I've been studying the songwriting of Julian Casablancas and the Strokes for a while now, so I set out to figure it out. Let's listen and figure out together why these two songs sound related. Let's take a look at Call Me Back. It's a bossa nova rhythm. The emphasis on the beats is on the 1 and the 2, and then the final measure of the 2-measure phrase, the 4, and that's a strong bossa nova. If you hear Julian Casablancas' vocal, he lines up with that as well. But what about At the Door? There's something similar about that rhythm, but what is it? So the rhythm is distinct and different, yet they feel related somehow. Why is that? Let's put the rhythm to Call Me Back on a side stick of a snare, and let's put the rhythm to At the Door as a kick drum. When we put these two together, it might reveal why they feel related. So the rhythm to Call Me Back is a bossa nova type rhythm, and the rhythm to At the Door is sort of the kick drum rhythm to a bossa nova beat. It's different, it's not the same pulse. A bossa nova beat would be the same all the way through, repeating and then the beat, the upbeat into the beat of either the 1 or the 3. Julian Casablancas and the Strokes don't do that. They create something a little more syncopated where it creates a different pulse. And you can see that the strategy here, the idea of songwriting, was to create a guitar accompaniment that set the mood in a minor key, but also created a pulse and rhythm that served as a solo accompaniment to the vocal verse. And it works really well. It's unlikely that these songs were written with a rhythmic connection in mind. In fact, both songs were written in a collage sort of way. Both At the Door and Call Me Back were written in gradual parts, kind of in the studio. Julian said that Call Me Back was a collection of parts that they had and they put together and created something very beautiful. And he also said that in At the Door, it was written in the studio with Rick Rubin and their guitar tech and friend, that he came up with a guitar part that was later played by Nick on the actual album, but that it was written in the studio. Rick Rubin didn't like the choruses that Julian had originally come up with, so he kept pushing him to come up with new choruses until it found something that had the right feeling to Rick Rubin and the Strokes.
Yeah, we were trying to get, I really liked the verse, and we tried it with different parts, and we would show it to Rick, and he was like, no. And then finally, a chorus came that I thought was good enough, and we put it together, and he was into it, and so we built that one. That was probably the least organic song, I think, on the record, because it was Rick, Paul wrote the verse, and I sang over it, and then I brought in the chorus, and then we just kind of, Nick came in and we recorded on the digital guitar, and I added all these random classical parts. Well, it was like secretly classical or whatever, but I don't know. That one was kind of a laboratory freak.
Nikolai Frater has confirmed this as well. He said in an interview that At the Door was guitar driven, and that Rick Rubin helped steer them into exploring the feelings of it more. So in both cases, the songs were written in a ad hoc kind of assembly way. Julian Casablancas has done this other times. He did this with the Voids on Crunch Punch and other songs. But because these songs were created in a piecing together approach, it's very unlikely that this was an intentional callback to Call Me Back. What's interesting is these two songs use these Latin rhythms as part of the vocabulary. And other songs that are done by the Strokes that use this Latin vocabulary don't have the same feeling. I asked you all in a poll if the song Call It Fate, Call It Karma fit into the similar vibe of Call Me Back and At the Door. And a majority of you said that it didn't belong with those other two, which I agree with. It has a different feeling. But some of you did think it did. And I wonder if that's because of the similar sort of form of a very minor key verse going to a major key, the relative major, for the chorus. Maybe that form made you feel like these songs were similar. But I think overall most people agree, and myself I agree with as well, that Call It Fate, Call It Karma doesn't exactly fit with these other two songs. But why is that? They have a similar form, focusing on minor and then going to the relative major for the chorus, and they both use Latin rhythms in the verse. What is it about other parts of the song that make it feel different? Let's take a look at the choruses. Listen to the momentum change there. The verses had a strong pulse, very much going forward, momentum. But with the chorus, everything slows down, and the guitar accompaniment is really on the one and maybe the third beats. They really slow down. Instead of it being a syncopated pulse, it is much more sparse and just creates a feeling of space and like a big vacuum that the vocals kind of fill in, making this chorus feel majestic and huge. Both do this same thing. And both songs use similar types of ways to do this. Both actually use guitars and a sort of vibraphone or bell instrument to make a sort of chiming sound that really is beautiful and angelic. But the other thing is that the types of ways that they make this are also similar. In Call Me Back, the guitar and the bell part are playing in harmony with each other, just in fifths, which is a kind of empty, hollow sound. It's not very solid in any particular way, so it creates a feeling of space between those two notes, which contributes to the feeling of the chords being established, but not being kind of boxed in. In At the Door, they actually are just in octaves, so they're even the same note. The guitar and the bell part are just the same part in octaves, and they create the same sort of momentum shift by slowing down and creating the space by having these wide intervals. It's actually really interesting that Call Me Back came before At the Door, because in some respects, At the Door is more harmonically simple than Call Me Back. Call Me Back uses a key change to create liftoff and really jump up to the chorus and have it sort of explode in this very majestic way. Rick Rubin has said that he is very much a reducer and simplifier, and he tries to get down to the feelings of things. So it seems possible that Rick Rubin didn't really encourage any sort of major chord changes or key changes for the chorus in At the Door, even if maybe Julian wanted to do something like that, as was his tendency to do in a song like Call Me Back. What's interesting, though, is, of course, Falling Out of Love has since come out, and we now know that compared to At the Door and the rest of the new Abnormal, which didn't really have any key changes other than to a relative minor and relative major, this song, Falling Out of Love, has an incredible key change to the a fifth up in the relative minor of that fifth, and then borrowing chords from the melodic minor of that. It goes from being in the key of A to a C sharp minor, which is really cool. So maybe these are one of the things that are changing about the Strokes as they approach this new album with Rick Rubin, Reality Awaits. Maybe this is something that they didn't do as much on the new Abnormal, and now are trying to get back to sort of that sound. Julian Casablancas is very interested in harmony and exploring new ways of doing things, and it seems possible that in the interim years, Julian has become more insistent on using things like auto-tune, and also insistent on having these sort of key changes that he really likes and that is very common in the Void's music, his side project where he feels more inclined to be able to express all that he wants to express musically. So perhaps that's what's going on. There's actually a lot of similarity in the overall form as well. At the Door is essentially a verse-chorus, bridge song, where Call Me Back is a verse-chorus, bridge. And what's interesting is the bridges of both, while different on many levels, there are some sonic similarities. The Call Me Back bridge essentially goes into triplets to kind of speed up the feeling, create a more brisk, excited feeling before going back to the verse again. And in At the Door, it speeds up as well. Julian Casablancas starts using auto-tune and kind of does a sort of Gregorian chant layering thing where he creates another sort of vocal collage, just like he did on Call Me Back. It's another thing that he did on Call Me Back that he does again on At the Door, a sort of vocal collage of him harmonizing with himself. But also the guitar part does speed up. It starts using 8th notes and 16th notes to create this feeling of increase in pace. So the bridge also is similar. If you can hear it, you can notice that the feelings are kind of similar ideas. They speed up the accompaniment to create even more tension before the final release, and the Casablancas vocal is doubled and he harmonizes with himself, both on Call Me Back and At the Door. This is another way that these songs are similar. So what is going on here? These two songs do have a lot in common. They use a very propulsive groove solo guitar accompaniment on the verse to create forward momentum to the chorus, where it drops out, becomes much more sparse and simple, and where there is a chorus that is a guitar and a bell instrument, creating a lot of space using intervals for Julian Casablancas' vocal to shine through. And then there is a bridge where that speed is increased again, and Julian Casablancas uses doubling and more of his voice to create a sort of vocal collage. What is it about these two songs that led this to happen? It doesn't seem likely that it was intentional, given the fact that both songs were sort of put together as collages with other people's involvement. But it does seem like there's something about the rhythmic pulse in the verse that leads to the big payoff in the chorus where it slows down. If you are a songwriter and you want to learn and try to create a song like Julian Casablancas and the Strokes in this kind of mold, you might try to experiment with this. Use a strong, propulsive groove for your solo accompaniment for the guitar to the verse, and then slow things down, make it much more sparse for the chorus, use intervals so that your vocal can really shine through. Give it a try. If you make it, please let me know. I'd be curious to hear how it's all going for you. If you are using that as an idea of Julian Casablancas and the Strokes to create a song like that. What do you think? Do you think that Call Me Back and At the Door do sound related? Many of you did in the poll, but if you think that this is a coincidence, I'd be curious to hear your opinion. If you think it's almost too much of a similar song for it to be a coincidence, I'd also like to hear. So let me know in the comments what you think. I've been loving having all this conversation with you all. It's been kind of an adventure to recently increase the community size and have more of a conversation about the music. I've been having a lot of fun with this. I'm really looking forward to Reality Awaits and new material that's coming out. It sounds like the Voids are going to be recording again soon, so that's also very exciting. It's a really exciting time. Please leave anything you like me to do in the comments. I've also been trying to incorporate some of the ideas that you all have in my videos, so I've been loving the vibe that we've been having going on here. If you liked this video, like and subscribe. I have more videos coming, particularly about the Strokes and the Voids and Julian Casablancas. And thanks for watching. Bye.